What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper, and I have a special guest, Chuke's Outdoor Adventures. And I've been following him for a couple of years, and it's really cool to have him on my channel and able to pick his brain a little bit about different topics related to cold weather survival, bear defense, and firearms, hunting, and life in Alaska. So before we get started, do you mind just telling everybody about your channel? Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do on YouTube? What are your interests? What are your passions?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was pretty cool. I met you through Chuck from Alaska Ballistics, so it's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I started this channel probably around 8, 9 years ago, and I'm primarily kind of a hunter fisherman, but it kind of morphed into a lot of gun reviews, and obviously firearms are one of my passions. So I do a lot of gun reviews. I'm especially fond of hunting rifles and 10 millimeter big revolvers, bear
Mhm.
defense, that kind of thing. I have a small series of overlanding, which is, going off on a, 4x4 truck with a rooftop tent on top of it. So I'll do that too. But primarily, I don't get to hunt as much as I'd like to. I probably get 2 or 3 big like hunts where I'm camping for extended periods of time, a few days at a time, and hunting large game, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And in the
Mhm.
meantime, I'm just doing lots of tests with firearms and that kind of thing. So little dabbling in different areas, but it's a lot of fun. And I primarily like to just collect meat in the freezer, do a lot of fishing and hunting here in Alaska. It's pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds like a paradise for a lot of hunters like myself down here in the lower 48. Alaska's like it's like
Mhm.
a paradise for us. Like we always dream about hunting in Alaska. So it's like a lot of us are envious when we watch your channel.
It is amazing, but after hunting in the lower 48, I'm actually jealous of you guys because when me and Chuck go on hunts here, it takes a lot of resources. We got to drive for
Hmm.
days. We have to book airplanes and boats to get us to where the animals are. However, when I was hunting in New York, I was literally every morning I'd just get up at 4 a.m. and walk outside of grandpa's house, into the cornfield, and I could just start hunting. And
Yep, yep.
you know, I could just hunt after work in the cornfields. And it was
Yeah, yeah.
for me that paradise because you don't have to take a week off work like we do here. You can literally hunt every
Just go.
night after work.
Yeah, that's true. You're kind of surrounded by deer over here. They're everywhere. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I love it. But yeah, it is hard to beat because we've got larger animals here and lots of bears and stuff. So it's pretty cool for sure.
Yeah, I bet it must be really awesome. And just so people are aware, you're actually like a lifelong Alaskan. You didn't move to Alaska from the lower 48, right? Or did you?
Right. Yeah. I was born and raised in a small town of Homer. They call it the cosmic hamlet by the sea. There's
Hmm.
only 3% of the world, I think, that has a little bay surrounded by mountains that go from sea level to whatever 3,000 feet. It's really interesting and beautiful. So
Yeah, I've,
absolutely.
I've I've heard of that place. It sounds amazing. So I guess I want to just talk a little bit about Alaska. A lot of my viewers are interested in Alaska and people in
Mhm,
general. With the all the TV shows in recent years, like Gold Rush and
mhm.
Alaska Bush People and all those shows about Alaska. There's just a lot of interest now. A lot of preppers actually have been also moving to Alaska. There's one
Right.
guy on YouTube. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Alaska Prepper.
I
He's
I
got
have watched his pretty yeah, he's pretty good. I've watched a few of his videos.
Yeah, he's a great guy, Rudy. So a lot of people in the prepping community, they see Alaska as like one of the best places to be if you're a prepper. And I just wanted
Mhm.
to get your opinion as someone who's actually born and raised in Alaska. You have a unique unique perspective on this because you actually lived there your whole life, so a lot of things that people who move there may not know. So
Mhm.
like if somebody's considering moving to Alaska, what are some considerations that, what are some things that they might overlook, because they might just be kind of blinded by the beauty and the freedom and all that. But
Mhm.
there's always negatives, with everything. So what are some things that you notice that people overlook, or you think that people might overlook?
Well, first of all, I would say make sure you have the resources to come up here and survive. Jobs can be an issue if you're in the healthcare field or an oil worker. It's not a problem, but just we have a low population. There's more competition for certain jobs, so make sure you got that covered. And then when you come up here, just be aware that it's very dark and depressing and cold in the winter. I mean, when I lived in outside of Buffalo, people are all like, "Oh, it's colder here." Like, so yeah, sometimes, and you get a lot of snow, but the snow melts,
Right.
after a couple months. Our winters are like 7, 9 months long. I mean, it's and we lose light, so you get very depressed. Almost everybody has some level of seasonal affective depression. Uh, even right now we're gaining 3 minutes, 4 minutes of light a day, but in times in December there might be barely over 4 hours of light, and it seems like the sun just kind of comes over the mountains. It's not very bright, and
Yep.
then it's extensive periods of cold. A lot of people will come up here either in the military or they come up for a nursing job and they leave after 3 years usually,
3 years.
just because yeah, usually they don't make it past 3 years because it's so depressing. The cold and the dark really get to it. You got to take vitamin D. I was happy this winter because I just pumped myself full of vitamin D. So
Hmm.
that makes a huge difference. But I went to college in New Mexico and I was wearing a t-shirt in December. It was 60 degrees and I was just in paradise after, living here my whole life. It wears on you. So um
Okay.
it's not for everyone, and like I said, a lot of people, they don't make it more than 3 years, and their wives just want to leave. Oh no, I can't stand it here anymore. Let's go back to the Midwest where I can be warm in the winter, at least warmer than here.
Right.
So
At least, yeah.
yeah. So be
You have
prepared for
more.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not the funnest place sometimes in the winter, unless you really are into skiing or snowboarding, which I'm into a little bit, but not that much.
Yeah, I think people don't understand just how cold it gets. I mean, it's like, you pick like the coldest state in the lower 48, like North Dakota or
Mhm.
Minnesota, and that's like probably not as bad as many parts of Alaska. If correct me if I'm wrong, as far as like those states
I'm
compared
in
to Alaska.
Yeah, I'm in South Central, where it's not too bad, but if you're in Fairbanks, it's horrible. And it gets below zero in North Dakota and Minnesota, but we have these cold snaps where it'll stay 20 below, for a week or two. And then, in Fairbanks, when it's 20 below here, it's like 40 below there. And they
Wow,
regularly get 20, 30 below zero. And
that's insane.
once it gets above 30 below zero, I can't tell the difference of anything because you walk outside, you feel your eyeballs freezing. The moisture on your eyeballs starts to freeze. It's
Yeah,
awful.
I bet. It must be that's just insane. I mean, that's like, so when it gets that cold, I mean, there's not much you can really do. I mean, you're not going to really be going
Yeah.
for walks, you know what I mean? I mean, you can if you want to, but you're pretty much
Some
going to
some
be
people
inside.
do. Yeah, most people stay inside. It is fun. I've gone out and a couple hunting trips when it was really cold like that, and it's fun, but you really got to bundle up and make sure you have solid gear or you're
It's
going to get
dangerous. I mean,
frostbite.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I'd be afraid of losing
it'll
a
kill you.
toe or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it'll
that's
kill you
that's
for sure.
crazy. So what's like the biggest city in Alaska, the biggest metro area? Is it Anchorage? Like Southern Alaska would be the most populated?
South Central, yeah, Anchorage is the biggest city. I think Wasilla and Fairbanks are the next biggest ones, and then probably Juneau. But yeah, Anchorage has roughly over 300,000. people, and it's spread out over 40 miles, so it doesn't feel like a big city. It
Right.
feels like a big suburb, really.
Okay.
Um, we've got a real small downtown that has like a few skyscrapers, but otherwise the city is spread out over 40 miles. It's kind of weird. But yeah,
So you
so our population is small.
are you guys like, do you notice like a lot of building going on? Is there like a influx of people over the last few years, like more new houses going up, or is it kind of like stagnant?
It comes and goes. We have a serious deficit in real estate right now. Like there's not enough housing for the population, and any you could buy like a really expensive $1 million house, but housing is expensive here. A
Mhm.
typical single family home now is probably 300 to 400,000,
Oh,
and
wow.
any normal homes like that, they get bought pretty quickly upon getting on the market. So the only
Okay.
things available on the market right now are kind of weird fixer uppers or
Or
houses
super
that don't
expensive.
quite meet that mold. Yeah. So,
Right.
and it depends. Like I said, we've got a influx of population. We've got some pretty major military bases here, so the people are always coming and going. They'll come up, do a tour for a few years, and then PCS out. And then
Mhm.
a lot of professionals, nurses, and things like that. They want to see
Mhm.
Alaska. They come up here for 2 or 3 years and then they move. So it's kind of a fluctuating uh, population. It's definitely slowly growing. There's some areas that are really growing, like the Matsu Valley is they're kind of booming, and
Okay.
there is a lot of construction in the summertime, but we've got a short window because there's not a lot of construction in winter. It only
Mhm.
happens in the summer, so you got 4 months to work on structures. It's kind of weird.
Right, because of the ground freezes for such a long period of time. So, like
Yeah.
in your area, like let's say the Anchorage area, like that whole area, what would you say like you know, first snowfall to last snowfall? Like when does it start? When does it end? Would you say more or less like what months can you expect like snow starts and ends, you know?
It has fluctuated a little bit, but always by Halloween, you can kind of count on snow sticking by Halloween. End of
Wow.
October is
Okay.
when there'll be a few snows before then. They usually melt, but by
Right.
Halloween, we'll get snow, and it doesn't melt until May, sometimes
Wow.
June. So it's
Gee,
it's
that's crazy.
you can count on 7, 8 months of snow. So
Wow. That's just
yeah.
crazy. As far as like cost of living goes, like groceries or gasoline, like how does that look compared to the lower 48? And also like property taxes, like are property
Mhm.
taxes pretty high over there or pretty reasonable?
They're reasonable. It's nothing like California. Cost of living's very high. Price of housing is very high. Groceries are high.
Hmm.
Gasoline's on the higher side, definitely.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's expensive to live here for sure.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I guess there's a misconception people have. They think like Alaska, it's like, it's like this unpopulated state and it's going to be like dirt cheap. You're going to go there and buy a house for
Yeah,
like half price and everything's cheap, but it's not that way because Alaska's basically like an island, right? Because it's
right.
not connected to the lower 48. So they got to fly everything in and stuff like
Yeah,
that. So that jacks up the prices of everything. Am I correct? Or
everything. Yeah, and it, I'm lucky because I'm in the big city here. But if you go out to the villages, it's ridiculous. The prices skyrocket. Like I visited a village 10 years ago, and everything was $5. Like gallon of milk,
Mhm.
$5, $10, loaf of bread, $5, $10. You
Wow.
buy a small, grocery bag of groceries, it's hundreds of dollars. It's just
Oh my gosh.
ridiculous.
So it's actually more
Gallon of
expensive.
gasoline, yeah, a gallon of gasoline could be $10. It exponentially goes up when you
Wow.
get farther and farther out. Like I'm right
Okay.
where the barges come in, but once
Okay.
you get way out there, it gets ridiculous.
Oh, wow. See, that's funny. It's usually like opposite down here. It's further out you go, it's cheaper, but I guess over there it's makes a lot of
Oh,
sense. They got to cover the costs of everything.
Yeah.
So what are like the gun laws and the politics like in Alaska? Is Alaska's like a red state now, but it wasn't it like blue a while back, and it like is it like a swing state or what's the deal? And what are the gun
Yeah,
laws like?
yeah. It's as far as gun laws, we're very free up here. It's I don't know if it's constitutional carry, but you don't need. I have a CCW permit, but I don't
Mhm,
need it. You can conceal carry, you can open carry. We have no magazine restrictions. It's one of the freest states as far as firearms, so that's wonderful.
mhm,
Um, that it is a red state, but this last election, the Democrats are definitely gaining in power, and sometimes in the cities, the municipal elections will swing blue. So things could change, but it's people move up here to be free and get away
yep,
from people and that kind of thing, and we do enjoy that. And even it's kind of cool because even a lot of the Democrats that I work with and stuff, they're into guns. So it's just like kind of an Alaska thing. Everybody's into gun, and you kind of have to have something like that if you want to survive a hike in the woods too. There's just, someone 10 miles from here, went and emptied his garbage and got mauled by a giant brown bear that ate him, a couple years ago. It can be scary. There's just, bears and wolves and, big
yeah,
beasts out
yeah.
in the woods that they will eat you if you're
Yeah,
not prepared.
even the moose are more dangerous than the bears sometimes, right? I mean, they can
They
trample
are. They
you.
kill more. Yeah, they kill more people. They're not very smart and they spook easy and they'll just crush you with their hooves. So,
That's
yeah,
insane.
yeah.
So, okay, so I noticed in a lot of your videos you mentioned that sometimes you can't find ammo or firearms in Alaska, that there's availability issues, or sometimes they can't ship stuff up there. Um, so do you have like some ways to get around that? Like, is that a big problem in Alaska? And why is that? Is it just because they don't want to fly stuff over, or what's the deal with that?
Well, the big problem is right now things are back in stock, so it's not bad. We've had Cabela's and Bass Pro move up here. Sportsman's has been here for a while, which I'm all for because they have kind of lower prices. There's lots of mom
Hmm.
and pop gun shops, but there's a lot of ammo available right now, which is nice. The thing is, we can't order ammo off the internet like you guys can
Yep.
right to your door in the lower 48. They used
Yep.
to allow it, then they had a hazmat fee. Now it's not allowed. No website will send you loaded ammo to your door. So the ammo is more expensive here, and we're at the mercy of the distributors. So that is very frustrating.
So, yeah, so
The only
you're
the only
basically,
workaround.
yeah,
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
The only workaround is you can have a friend in Washington State that you can order ammo off the internet for a good price. They'll store it up, and you can have it barged up here on a
I
pallet
see.
on a big barge. That's the only workaround. I've got
Okay.
a friend that does that. I haven't done that yet.
Okay. That'd probably be like bigger quantities. I mean, you're not gonna do that for
Yeah.
like a box of 20.
No. Yeah.
That'll be like, you're really loading up like, hundreds or
Right.
thousands of rounds of something. And right.
Yeah.
So you're basically at the mercy of your local stores or your big box stores. It's not like over here where it's like if I can't find something at my local gun shop, I can just go onto the internet, Ammo Seek or whatever, and just order it.
Yeah.
So that's
That
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Well, that's why a lot of people reload up here. I mean, you have to buy
Mhm.
the powder and the primers in the store, but you can get all the other parts and just do a lot of reloading. So that's what a lot of people do too.
So you can't get powder shipped up there or primers either, right?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you can just get the brass and the bullet projectiles themselves and,
Right.
the loading press, all that stuff, the dies, you can get all that mailed to your house, but the primers and the powders, you're again at the mercy of stores here.
Okay. So that's one downside is, I guess you could say is, that people may not realize. Now, moving into like cold weather, survival and stuff. Obviously, you know,
Mhm.
being an Alaskan, you definitely know a lot about that. Um, and want to just pick your brain a little bit, see what you do. So, like, um, when you're going out on a hunt, you know, I don't know what the
Mhm.
seasons are like in Alaska. Is it usually like in the colder months, or is it in the summer months? Do you ever hunt in like the colder months, or?
It most of the hunting I do is typically in August and September where it's starting to cool off and we can get
Okay,
snow, especially
right,
since I like to go into the mountains. It's definitely it's like a very cold fall day for you
right,
probably,
right.
but it is getting into early winter for us a little bit. So yeah, cold, a little bit on the colder side.
So it's probably like below freezing, and you know, it's okay. So
Easily
like,
sometimes.
what do you typically like as far as your layers? Like, what do you wear? Like, if you're going out like that, what's some gear that you take with you to keep warm, and you know, any
Mhm.
other kind of like cold weather survival stuff you bring with you, so you know you keep all your toes and fingers intact when you come back.
Well, I like to go lightweight, but definitely merino wool layers, fleece,
Hmm.
down light packable down jackets, you know, just a lot of layers of that'll keep you warm. But my biggest survival thing, and it's interesting you asked because I know you mentioned a poncho is a good thing that you like to put in your bug out bag.
Yep.
But I will have a wooby, a quilted poncho liner, and a poncho on all of my hunts, and
Okay.
that has saved my life on more than one occasion when weather just hit in and I just put on that poncho liner with the poncho on top of it, and it kept me warm and alive because I've been caught in the weather a couple times while hunting. And then I went a step further and I got I believe it's the Kafaru wooby. And so
Okay.
before I was using a quilted military wooby, which they're all right, but this Kafaru wooby is 3 times thicker. It's got this artificial insulation, and it's just like a
Hmm.
giant comforter that you put
Hmm.
on. And I cut a hole in the middle of it so I could use it with my poncho, and
Okay.
that has been the ultimate survival tool for me. I take that on every hunting trip because it packs in a little stuffed sack. And then when I get cold, I just put that thing on and then put the poncho on.
That's great. That's great. It's probably pretty lightweight too. I would imagine it's not
Yeah,
super heavy or
very
anything.
lightweight. Yeah.
That's good. So, do you have any like just recommendations to people, like for just general recommendations for being out in the cold? If you go out in the wilderness and it's winter time, let's say you're hunting or whatever, snowmobiling, as far as you know, just proper gear and dressing properly. I mean, do you have any recommendations how people should go about that?
Absolutely. A lot of people do hunt small game in the winter, so they're out in the snow.
Hmm.
There's also predator hunting. People will go out and hunt wolves, that kind of thing, ice fishing. For winter time, full on winter, a lot of people like those bunny boots, the army bunny boots. But I have
Hmm.
noticed that you know, they're supposed to be rated for -30 or whatever, but I have noticed, you know, even in 0 degrees, your feet will get cold if you're not moving in almost
Yeah, yeah,
anything. You know, it says it's rated for -30, but if you're
yeah.
actually in -30, you're still going to freeze unless you move.
Right.
So I usually get for the extreme cold, I get stuff that they use on the North Slope. So that is the
Okay.
very tip top of Alaska where they do oil production where it gets -70 in the winter and they have to have like extreme, you know,
Right.
anti-Arctic clothing. And so I use these moon boots from Kavik. I think it's
Okay.
Kavick, but
Okay.
I've got those they're rated to like -70. And I've been on a snowmobile when it was -40 and my feet were just toasty warm.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Have you done
and
a
then I
review of
also
those on your channel, or?
I should do one. I don't have a review of them, but you can look up Kavik
Okay.
boots on the internet. You know, I specifically went to a store that supplies people that go to the Arctic slope because I wanted the very warmest thing. And so they said get the Kavik boots. And then I also got this giant parka that is also rated for like -70.
Mhm.
I want to say it might be a Kavik too. I can't remember the brand, but I'll tell you after this so you could put it up. But I have this giant parka. It's not goose down because those get really expensive. Those are like, $1,000 for a giant goose down parka, but it's artificial fill, and it was probably 200 or 300 bucks. But it's just a big parka that I put on, and then those
Mhm.
Kavik boots, and then snow pants, wool layers, merino wool, and then really good mittens like snow machining mittens, and a baklava for your face. Got to cover your face.
Right.
So just stuff like that you have to have, I think.
Okay. Okay. And do you use snowshoes at all?
Chuck is really into snowshoes. I have a pair. I don't go out and do it that much, but that is really fun when we go out and do like small game hunting. Because yeah, when the snow is deep, you can get through the snow, but sometimes the snow is just so incredibly deep. You have to have giant extended snowshoes if because the regular ones will just
Just
push
sink.
right back down. Yeah, we call it post holing when you're like up to your thighs in snow and trying to walk. It's
Wow.
miserable.
That's insane. Wow. So,
Yeah.
I want to pick your brain about bear protection. This is
Mhm.
one of your favorite topics, and I think it's actually how I found your channel. I think the
Okay.
first video I ever saw was I think it was you and Chuck, and you guys were talking about like your top bear protection firearms, and you were showing off
Mhm.
like a 454 Cazul. It just
Right.
showed up on it showed up on the side of the YouTube, because
Okay.
I'm into big bore handguns, so I saw that. I'm like, oh, these guys are pretty cool. So I followed you guys.
Thanks.
That was like a couple of years back, but you do a lot of videos on bear defense, and it's a very interesting topic. I love all stuff related to that.
Mhm.
So you know, we'll get into the firearms in a little bit, but I wanted to ask you if there's anything you do besides firearms to protect yourself from bears. Like, do you like hang up your food in a tree? Do you,
Yep.
carry bear spray? I mean, are there any other things? Are you more alert in certain areas when you're going? Like, can you identify bear habitat? Or is there like certain things you do?
You'll know that you're in bear country when you see big piles of scat. If you're near rivers, they leave dead fish. If there's any salmon near a river, you got to be very careful about bears. Um, and then as far as a lot of people get electric fences for their tents, and I need to get one of those because that'll.
Mhm.
Sorry about that. So you'll know that you're in a bear country. They also scratch the trees to mark their territory, like on
Mhm.
the Wolverine movie.
Yeah.
They you'll see that all the bark is ripped off, and you'll see these giant claw marks. Um, it's pretty terrifying because I've been charged by bears and stalked by bears. We'll talk about that. But yeah, some of my friends will wrap up their food double up in Ziploc bags, all of their food if they're on an extended camping trip, and hang it way up in a tree. You want to make sure it's like 50 feet away from your tent. You don't want
Mhm.
to keep a cooler or any food right by your tent because they'll come in the middle of the night ripping around. Any trash you have, you got to burn it or stow it and make sure it's air. You just scent is huge. They can smell food. So be very careful about that. Hang your food up. Uh,
But what if
the
you
bears, what's that?
what if you're out, like, let's say you're on like a day trip and you bring like a tuna sandwich and you throw it in your pack. Are they going to be able to smell that and then zone in on you?
Sometimes they can. You just want to be prepared. You just want to be
Okay.
always alert and prepared. And it's best not to be by yourself. I've been on some solo hunting trips that I probably shouldn't have gone on because it's
Mhm.
if you've got somebody else, they can back you up if you're getting attacked or charged by a bear. So strength
Right.
in numbers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And even like going into the firearms thing,
Mhm.
you could have the best handgun, best rifle, but what happens if you're facing down a charging bear and something happens, click, the gun doesn't go off. And
It's
if you don't have someone to back you up, you better hope you can transition or clear the round. And, by the time you do that, you're done, if they're
it's
coming in hot,
terrifying.
right?
Yeah, sometimes there's nothing you can do because those big brown bears can run up to 40 miles an hour. If you're in thick brush, they could be coming at you at 40 miles an hour, and you might have 1 second to hit that head,
Hmm.
that's bobbing around, and it's almost impossible. So if you're in the wrong area, um, it's almost impossible to stop an attack. If and it depends on the bear. Some of the bears are really mean, and they'll just tear you apart. I mean, it's terrifying.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. So, I mean, they're basically like as fast as like a white-tailed deer for close distances. They can.
Move very fast. Yeah, they can move very fast. They've got those long front legs, and they can just leap and just, 40 miles an hour is just crazy. They can outrun a human, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. Is there any way you could like, try to I don't know the proper word, but like kind of lose them in like brush if it's like kind of thick? Could you like kind of, maneuver your way through the brush to kind of like lose them a little bit? Like they might get confused or they might be able not be able to go through because it's too thick. Is there anything you could do like to kind of hide
No,
from them? No, they'll just plow right
no,
through.
not from brown bears. What scares me about brown bears is when one is running in the woods, it sounds like a tank. They are crushing trees and limbs, and you just hear limbs snapping and trees popping. They
Yep.
blow through anything like a tank. It's terrifying. A black bear is different. You can fight a black bear off with your hands if you're a big guy.
Hmm.
Especially if it's a smaller black bear. There's been
Right.
people that have killed black bears with sticks and rocks. So if it's a black bear, to save your life, a lot of times big black bear will still kill you, but do some fighting. But if it's a brown bear, you're not going to have any chance of that.
No, they're so massive, and what do they get up to like 1,000 pounds easily, right? Over there, especially the
And yeah,
salmon.
some areas, yeah, above that, yeah.
That's
So
just so
yeah,
massive. I mean, it's like trying
yeah,
to.
and they're
It's like it's like a car. It's like it's just they could just sit on you and kill you.
they're mean. Yeah, my first brown bear I killed was in a area where they need to go in and clear some out because there's so many bears that they're starving and they're literally eating each other. And
Wow.
I killed this brown bear at midnight. And there was still a little bit of light. I went back to my tent, and a black bear had ripped apart my tent, gotten my cooler, took all my food, and I shot at it, and it just kept coming back and harassing me. I couldn't sleep, so I had to pack all my crap up and go to a station for commercial fishermen. And luckily, I had a signal on my phone, and I just told the pilot to come pick me up because I had been up for 24 hours. And if I slept, this bear was going to eat me because he didn't care that I was shooting at him. He just kept coming back.
Wow.
So it was a nightmare. It was like a giant beast was literally stalking me. It was horrible.
So you obviously hunt bear. You've shot a
Mhm.
couple bears, right? A couple
Good
grizzlies.
good handful of bears. Yeah.
What do you I don't know if you still hunt grizzly or not, but what is your like preferred cartridge and rifle? When you did shoot those bears, what were you using? What kind of
The the
ammo?
the one grizzly I shot, I had a bigger bore rifle. It was a 300 SAUM, so you don't hear about that one too much. Short action ultra mag, very
Hmm.
similar to a 300 Win Mag. For
Okay.
brown bear, I would say 30-06 and 308 you can kill them, but you really want something big, a big Magnum, 338, 375, that
Hmm.
kind of thing. Like if I ever get Kodiak brown bear tag, I'm going to go buy a 375 Ruger probably, or H and
Hmm.
H. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
you want big things like that.
okay. Okay. So, what are your personal choices as far as like bear defense firearms go? You obviously carry
Mhm.
a handgun everywhere, probably. Like,
Yeah,
what's your primary?
people get confused on my stance, and they think that I'm telling them that a handgun is ideal for bear defense, and it is not. That's a last option. For a bear defense, you want a rifle, and
Hmm.
the best bear defense is a 12 gauge shotgun with slugs or a 45-70 lever gun. That is ideal if
Hmm.
you want to stop a charging bear. Unfortunately, that's too heavy for a lot of hikes, and so
Right.
we're forced to take a handgun. So as far as
Right.
handguns go, you want 44 Magnum and bigger for a revolver. Anything smaller is not really considered enough. So 44 Magnum is a minimum for revolver, and really for semi-autos, 10 millimeter is very popular up here. Me and
Mhm.
Chuck are a big fan of 10 millimeter just because I can shoot a 10 millimeter way faster and stay on target and have
Yep.
probably a better chance to survive in some cases than my 454, which I love. But that thing, it may be hard to get a second shot or a third shot off with a charging bear that's coming in at 40 miles an hour. Whereas at 10 millimeter, I might get, 6 shots on target. So pretty much everybody likes 10 millimeter up here. It's just really popular.
Yeah, yeah. One thing about revolvers too is that, even though they're a lot more powerful, like, 44 Magnum or 454 or
Mhm.
500 Magnum, they're much harder to shoot because you got that long, heavy trigger pull,
Yeah.
and it's a whole nother animal than a
Yeah.
semi-automatic. You just touch the trigger and it just goes off. So it's just, I mean, you don't have to be like the best shooter in the world to make a good group with, a decent
Yeah.
semi-auto versus revolver. You need to really, really practice to get good at it. And then, when you're
Right.
in a situation where a bear is charging you, you're not shooting at paper at that point. Then you gotta, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's a lot more difficult. So I could see why. I mean, even like me, I'm a big dude. I have big bore handguns, but I know that, like when I shoot my 10 millimeters, I can shoot them fast and I get tight groups, and I could definitely
Mhm.
see the reason why people think that way. And I've done some testing with the 10 millimeter, and actually, I found in my testing at least that the 10 millimeter it penetrates almost as deep as the 44 Magnum will in
Yeah.
various types of medium, and you wouldn't even think, because the case is a lot
Right.
smaller, but for whatever reason, the 10 millimeter it's almost up there with the 44. So it's like, you have like a 15 or 30 round capacity, where you could just unload on that bear. It's definitely, it feels comforting, I bet for sure.
Yeah, I definitely have met people that have killed bears with 10 millimeter, but I do go back and forth because sometimes I feel more confident with my 454. It's just definitely more stopping power, and if you get one good
Sure.
headshot. So when I'm picking berries, like with the kids kind of close to the car, a lot of the
Hmm.
times I'll bring my Toklat 454, on a
Hmm.
hip holster or chest holster. But typically on longer hunts and hikes, I'll have a 10 millimeter.
So when you're out in the bush, you usually have, as far as defensive guns go, and not talking about your hunting rifle, you
Mhm.
always have some kind of sidearm, big bore sidearm with you, either 10 millimeter or revolver.
Ideally, yes. Yeah.
And you usually have it on a chest holster or around your hip or
Chest holster is kind of the go-to thing. The guides made that pretty popular 10 years ago because if you're falling back, you can grab it like that. It's easy to access. You can cross a river and keep it dry. So,
Mhm.
yeah, most of the outdoorsmen go with chest holsters here.
Do you ever carry, long guns when you're out, like, on a hike or hunt, like, for bear protection? I mean, it's legal, obviously, there to carry a long
Yeah,
gun for protection.
not as much, just because when I do, I always set it down. I get tired of carrying it,
Right.
especially on fishing trips. Sometimes I'll bring a shotgun, but I always, "Oh, this is so heavy." I set it down and go back to fishing, and then when you need it, oh, it's
It's
10 feet
right.
away.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, some people will do that in a group. One guy has a rifle, but, just because I'm so likely to set it down, I usually just go with, like, the big bore pistol.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now let me ask you this question. It seems like you like the 308 as a cartridge. I've seen a lot
Mhm.
of your videos on 308. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Like, I love 308, especially in an AR platform. I have two
Mhm.
AR-10s, and like, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts if like for like a like kind of like a general purpose like bush gun that you could hunt with, but also protect with, like a 308 AR-10 with maybe like some good strong bullets, like a TSX or something, pretty hot
Yeah.
loaded with like a 20 round mag and some spare mags. If you had to stop a bear and it was charging you and you had something like that and you started shooting at it, what are your thoughts? You think it would be effective, or
Oh,
is it not?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If it was a single shot 308, not so much, but that's the beauty. 308 is very effective. It's just behind a 30-06. 30-06 is considered the ideal hunting cartridge for Alaska.
Really?
308 will kill anything a 30-06 can, and you've got that low recoil. You can get a bunch of shots on target very fast in an AR-10. I think it's perfect. I mean, people kill bears up here with AK-47s.
Oh, wow.
The 308 is way more powerful than that 7.62 by 39. So yeah, I think it's ideal.
Oh, wow. That's good to know.
Mhm.
um, so you shot a bunch of bears, grizzlies. What was it like shooting your first grizzly? Were you like terrified that he might charge you, or what was going
Oh,
through your
very.
mind? Yeah.
I was in a tree stand and I was still terrified. I mean, they're monsters. I shot this grizzly with that 300 short action ultra mag, and it got really pissed and started spinning around, crushing trees, biting at the wound. I got
Hmm.
it right in its vitals, and it just
Right.
roared and spinning around, biting at itself. And then
Wow.
it went off, and this was at midnight, and the sun was just going down, and there was no way in heck I was going to follow it. So I waited till the next morning and followed the blood trail, and there it was. With It's pretty scary when you shoot a bear. And I sometimes I second guess the 10 millimeter, because Chuck and I have both shot bears, and I've watched him do it. We shoot it with our rifle, and then we follow the blood trail, and then we put it down with our pistols because it's still alive, crawling. And
Hmm.
every time taking two shots from the 10 millimeter in the head to put it down. Like
Wow.
Chuck's Chuck's black bear wasn't even that bad, and he had extreme penetrators, and uh, he had this Barnes ammo that was going too fast to expand, and I was like, shoot it again, looking through the things, and he kept shooting through it. So then
Right.
we tracked it. He's colorblind, so I had to track the blood for him. And when we found it, it was still alive. And he shot it once with his Glock 40, and then it took the second shot to kill it. And then that's the same thing with me. When I tracked my wounded bear, it took two shots from the 10 millimeter in the head. For some reason, it kept crawling after the first shot. So they're tough. But yeah,
So
it's
that was
very scary.
that was after you already shot it with the 300. What is that? Short action ultra mag.
No, that one I waited until the morning, and it was long dead. But this one that I had shot it with a 45-70, which is a
Okay.
great
Yeah.
bear
Yeah.
round. So I got it a couple times with the 45-70. It crawled probably 100 yards, and then when I found it, it took two shots from the 10 millimeter to put it down. So go
Wow.
figure.
I
So
heard I heard their skulls are really thick. I mean, is that kind of more like a myth, or is that true that their skulls
well,
are
I
like?
I always thought it was a myth because I tested it. I kept one of my big black bear heads and I shot it
Mhm.
with a 9 millimeter, and the skull wasn't actually that thick. The 9 millimeter went right in and destroyed the brain. Um,
Right.
but then it just depends on the bear and the angle, because my buddy shot a bear with the 30-06, and it bounced off his skull. Sometimes for some reason, the
That's
angle
crazy.
makes
Yeah.
it, yeah, makes it bounce. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it
Plus,
depends.
plus they got a
Yeah,
lot of muscle. Like around their head, they got all
yeah,
that muscle. You know what I mean? That probably
right.
might have had something to do with it. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
you just don't know.
so they're tough
And
to put down. I mean, even with these powerful big bore rifles, sometimes you need follow up shots. Am I
oh
correct?
yeah, Yeah, and really what guides do, if the bear's coming, they usually try to break the shoulder first, because
Hmm.
it's hard to hit a moving head. You got to hit a softball, it's
Right.
coming at you at 40 miles an hour like that. So what you do is you shoot it in the shoulder with your rifle, and that kind of puts it down. It's not running, and then you shoot it in the head the second shot.
Right.
So that
Yeah, they do.
that's typically what guides do to charging bears.
Wow. That's what they do in Africa. That's crazy. Um,
Yeah.
what are some of your favorite rifle rifle cartridges for hunting, or what are
Mhm.
some of your favorite rifle and pistol cartridges for hunting and self-defense?
Okay. Well, for surprisingly, for hunting, one of my favorite is 270, and you wouldn't think that because it's a
Hmm.
smaller kind of deer rifle, but I've killed large caribou with 270 primarily over the last few years, and it's just devastating. I consider it a magnum round. It's going so fast.
Hmm.
Um, 308 is really good. Any of the magnums are good, but there's something to be said for recoil. I'll develop a flinch shooting a
Hmm.
big, huge 338 with no break. I don't like that. So I tend to I'm going back towards 308,
Hmm.
just for the big game I do. As far as pistol rounds, I like the 10 millimeter, the 44 Magnum, the 454, 500 Smith and Wesson. Those are kind of my favorites. 357 Magnum will work too if that's all you got, but it's really nicer to have something bigger than that.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so that's
And
kind of it in a nutshell. 4572 is one of my favorites because that's, you can't go too far with it, but it'll knock down a big bear that's coming at you.
yeah, it's a huge bullet, huge diameter, caliber.
Yeah.
And out of all your firearms, what are some of your favorites? Not just from like a practical perspective, but just like guns that
Mhm.
you love, just fun to shoot.
If I had to pick three, I would definitely say the Ruger Toklat 454, just because it's kind of an iconic, classic Alaskan gun. They named it off of a Alaskan river here, and
Hmm.
it's just perfect. It's so big and heavy that the recoil isn't too bad with the 454. Um, so that would be one. Surprisingly enough, my second favorite would probably be a Smith and Wesson 686 357 Magnum, just
Hmm.
because it's classic. It's got 7 shots. I can wear it into town if I want, conceal
Right.
it. It's got
Right.
3-inch barrel. Um, and then as far as a rifle, I would have to say like a Marlin Skinner Trapper stainless 4570. You could
That's
put a
nice.
scope on it, hunt with it, bear protection or hunting. So
Okay. Nice firearms there. So it's pretty interesting that you actually shot your first white-tailed deer in New York of all places. That's correct, right?
yeah, we don't have whitetail up here. I mean, I think they're
Okay.
slowly making their way from Canada, but we don't even have deer in my area. I have to
Hmm.
travel hundreds of miles south to hunt Sitka blacktail deer, which are much
Okay.
smaller than whitetail. So
Yep.
that's why it's exciting to, my in-laws were in New York, and we don't have big bucks like that up here. So yeah, I went down there, and it was snowing that Thanksgiving, and there was, almost a foot of snow, and I, shot a buck with a 30-30. It was great.
That's awesome, man. What was it? What was it like? Just the experience of hunting, in the lower 48 compared to Alaska. I mean, I think you mentioned before,
Mhm.
the differences, but what is something that like stood out to you as far as like memorable moments about that hunt?
Uh, it was so convenient. Like I literally shot it maybe a 1,000 feet from Grandpa's house, and I just gutted it and drug it by its antlers back to Grandpa's house. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just, yeah. And then they rip you off with the people who process meat up here. I mean, you get a caribou, which is roughly the size of maybe a really big whitetail buck.
Mm-hmm.
A smaller caribou would equal a big whitetail buck. And up here, they charge you $400 to process it, make
400
sausages.
bucks. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, easily.
Wow.
Whereas in the lower 48, I just went to a farm and they charged me maybe $70 to
Yep.
process 2 deer.
Yep.
So
Yep. Yeah, it's dirt
that was
cheap.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, they really rip you off because they have a monopoly on that up here, which is unfortunate. So that stood out, and then just the convenience. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I could go out hunting and then go hang out with the kids later. And here I can't do that. I gotta,
It's like a
put
big
in for,
expedition.
yeah, you can take a week off work and go out and kill yourself hiking over mountains and stuff. So
And then
it
you got
was
to pack all the
definitely,
meat out.
yeah, yeah. Or, a lot of guys have four wheelers and they got to have the trailers for that.
Yep.
And it's a big hassle. So I definitely would say lower 48 is a little more enjoyable for hunting, I think at least.
Plus, you don't have to worry about grizzly bears, coming to your kill
Yeah.
and attacking you and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Well,
So,
there's some areas here where instead of running away from a gunshot, when a big grizzly hears a gunshot, it's like ringing the dinner bell. They're like, "Oh, I can go take some meat away from a hunter," and they'll come right at you.
I
So,
was just going to ask you that. I heard that that's kind of a thing. So
oh
that's
yeah,
true. That's not just like a myth or anything.
in some areas they will run, but in Kodiak especially, there's a lot of deer there. The grizzlies are pretty big and don't have much fear, and if they hear a shot, they're coming for you. They'll just head right at you and try to take your deer away from you. They don't care. So
Wow, that's just crazy to think about.
yeah,
It's like hunting for here. It's not like this big stressful thing. It's kind of more enjoyable.
right.
You go into the woods. You walk in a little bit. You sit down and you wait. You bring some snacks along or whatever. It's not like this big intense experience. I guess up there, you really got to plan for all kinds of contingencies, right? Because something could go wrong. And
Yeah,
are there any
yeah. You
areas
got
like? Do you guys have like areas right near like where you live, or the Anchorage area where you have like state forests that are like right outside of town that are convenient, or do they get too crowded? Is there a hunting pressure issue in Alaska?
for moose there is. That's why I don't do much moose hunting because you have to have the resources. And
Hmm.
once moose season opens, the bull moose leave, and you'll never see them because there's a million hunters out looking for them, and the moose go to the highest, swampiest area. Very
Okay.
difficult to find. But for small game and bears, there are some opportunities closer to town. Uh, but really you kind of have to get out a little farther to get into some good hunting. So, but I mean, you
Hmm.
could drive 3 hours and just be in pristine hunting if you know where to go. So,
Do you have any experiences with like close encounters with any big game animals, like besides that hunting story? Have you ever had like any close calls, like where you walked up on a bear and you didn't see it until the last minute, or anything like that, or a moose?
that was the main one where I got charged, but I have had, a lot of time you're walking on trails, you'll come up on a bear, and that's happened to me a couple times, and they kind of grunt, and it almost sounds like a big gorilla or something. They'll kind of and they kind of do a snorting sound, and yeah, it's and they also pop their jaws
Okay.
to scare, and which is weird. Is like they click their teeth and their jaws together really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's happened before. But yeah, that one where I I I kept shooting at that bear. That's why I always put a light on my 10 millimeter because it was midnight and you could see a little bit in the sky, but where the tree line was in the forest was pitch black. And I walked around my tent. I didn't realize there was a bear there, and it started growling and smacking the gravel with its
Oh wow.
claws.
Wow.
And it was probably ten feet away.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I unloaded my 44 Magnum, just 6 shots where I heard him doing that, and I heard him crushing logs and running off. I missed him.
Right.
But if I would have had that light on my 10 millimeter, I could have had turned the light on. I could have easily shot him. So,
Right.
pretty good idea. That's why I always have a light on my 10 millimeter now.
Yeah, I know like down here the black bears are more active at night and at dusk. Is it the
Mhm.
same way with grizzlies that they're more active in the dark hours?
Yeah, absolutely. You could see them any time of day, but yeah, pretty much when the sun goes down and the sun goes up is that window when you have more of a chance of seeing them.
And do they like wander into like I've read that they wander into Anchorage, like actual downtown. Does that actually happen
Yeah.
or
Oh, everywhere. Yeah. Yeah,
wow.
there's some that live in town. Yeah, more black bears, but
Right.
there's been brown bears right downtown walking down the street. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, black bears I mean, that's not too unusual, but for a brown bear to be like in downtown of like a major populated area, that's it's just crazy to
Yeah.
think about it. So I mean, pretty much Alaskans probably most people carry all the time, I would imagine, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. It's pretty big up here.
And finally, I want to ask you about I think one of your favorite topics, Bigfoot. Um,
Mhm.
I know, I think Alaska is like a hotspot. Am I right? Or I know there's a ton of
It
sightings in
very
Alaska.
very much so. Maybe not quite as hot as like Washington State, but
Hmm.
very yeah, all tons of sightings. It's in all the indigenous cultures have stories about a Bigfoot type creature. People seen them
Hmm.
all the time. Yeah,
Hmm.
and you think about our low population. There's just thousands of miles where there's no people. So it makes sense that there would be areas where nobody can even get to, and a creature like that could be living. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, for those people who don't understand, I mean, could you describe like how isolated Alaska is? I mean, there's some areas where there's just no roads going through, or I mean, basically the only way you can get in is to land a plane somewhere, and then if there's no runway or anything, you're not going to be able
Mhm.
to just land in a forest, right? So it's pretty. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a huge area too, right? Alaska's just massive, right? So I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I was on a big boat trip with my uncle, and we went around this area where the cliffs were just like straight up walls of jagged rock and a big forest on top. And my
hmm.
uncle said, no human can get there. I mean, you would have to take like a military helicopter to get there. There's no roads. You're
Right.
traveling over, glaciers and giant mountains, and there's nowhere to even park a boat. You would have to mountain climb up a sheer rock. And so, and that's everywhere. Lots of places like that. But for me, that kind of stood out. And I thought about that because he was like, yeah, no people can get there. That's just like
Yeah.
impossible to get to
Yeah.
unless
So
you're
it
like
makes
in a yeah, unless you're in a Blackhawk that can refuel and you're lucky enough to find a small patch where you can lower somebody down on the rope. That's the only way you could get to areas like that.
Yeah, so it kind of makes you wonder, what's out there, right? I mean, it's just so
Yeah.
vast. Because the common argument that I hear from people is like, the skeptics, they say like, well, we have thermal imagery, they could just fly over a forest and have their thermal cameras and just scan the whole area and they might be able to see something. But I think people don't understand how vast Alaska is. Like
Yeah.
some of these areas are it's just huge. It's like, isn't like
Mhm.
Alaska like one third or like half the size of the US? Like how long does it take to get from one side to the other?
It's pretty big. Like Chuck did a hunt closer to the top of the state from where we are, and it took him like almost it's like 18 hours of driving, 20 hours of driving just to get there. So
That's
yeah,
insane.
it's big. But as
It's
far as Bigfoot go, the most compelling evidence that I've personally seen would be down on Admiralty Island, I went and inspected the upside down trees. So
Okay, upside down trees.
yeah, and the the local people, the indigenous people say that the Bigfoot ripped up trees and then turned them upside down and shoved them way down in the ground to show their strength. And
Okay.
scientists say that it was a windstorm that ripped the trees up and then perfectly shoved them down into the ground upside down, which I don't see, because the ones I saw, you could tell that they were placed there. I mean, the way
Right.
they were set up, there's like a field and a couple of these trees on top of the mountain where they're just perfectly upside down, and really good sized tree, and you can't even move it. It's lodged way down in the ground, and you see the roots that are all dead, upside down.
Wow.
And so for me, I think that's kind of compelling that, something's going on there that's pretty tough to explain, because that was really weird to see.
I've never actually heard of that. So you're saying that there were trees that were basically shoved upside down in the ground, and how
Yeah.
big were these trees? Like how diameter wise, how thick were they?
I'll send you a picture, but I mean, some of them were like, they were a couple feet in diameter, maybe
Wow,
over a foot. They're big, good sized trees, and then the roots go way out. But yeah,
that's
really
crazy.
interesting.
That's insane, man. So would you say you believe that Bigfoot exists, or you're kind of not sure? You lean a little bit towards it. What are your
I'm not 100% sure, but I definitely lean towards it.
Mhm.
It's kind of weird though, because I do think the skeptics make a good point where, like, oh well, why didn't we ever find any bones, or why
Mhm.
why didn't everybody photograph it? I think there's like a weird spiritual aspect to it too, where they could like
Yeah.
phase into the next dimension or something, because
Yeah.
when you talk to the indigenous tribes, that a lot of stories are like that, and they're some of the whole mystery about it's kind of weird. So but I do also think that there's some areas that are just so isolated that there could be physical giant apes that are just been there forever, and that they are very good at hiding, very smart, and they clean up any remains. So I do tend to lean towards a belief in Bigfoot, which is
Yeah, that's
and a
kind of
lot of
where
old
I'm at.
yeah, a lot of old timers really believe in it too. If you go talk to the people that live way out in the woods, they take it pretty serious. So
So is it like in Alaska, obviously outside like the metro area, would you say like a lot of Alaskans think it's real, or like what are
yeah,
the attitudes of people towards it?
the smaller towns, the more rural you go, definitely the higher the belief in it is. Absolutely.
Wow. Have you ever had any strange experiences in the wilderness besides, seeing those trees? Like have you ever, anything weird you ever encountered when you were out in the woods?
Not really. The weirdest thing that I've experienced is maybe tree knocking. Like, you'll just
Okay.
hear like a big knock. Supposedly, that's how they communicate or scare
Hmm.
people, by picking up logs and smashing it on trees. Like, you'll hear something like that and be like, what could make that sound? And then also sometimes when you're way out in the woods on a hunting trip, you'll hear a weird uh, kind of screeching or cackling that sounds like it's a tropical bird or a monkey. And I,
That's
I don't
weird.
know. Yeah, I don't know what could make a sound like that in Alaska. Maybe it is a bird, but
Could be an owl or
it's
something. Maybe.
yeah, yeah, just some animal and you can't identify. So
Hmm.
it's just kind of spooky when you hear something like that.
Yeah, I had some two encounters, or not encounters, but two situations that like I'll never forget. One was actually when I was living in New York. It was like 2 years ago. I
Hmm.
was actually target shooting, and I was by myself in this area, and I was shooting a remote area, nothing but like woods around.
Hmm.
And I heard like women laughing in the forest, like
Oh
maybe like
wow.
two. 200 yards away. I'm not even, I don't do drugs. I don't do any drugs.
Right.
I don't take hallucinogens, or I don't do any of that stuff. I'm not even lying to you, man. I heard two like women, like younger women, just like laughing in the woods. And it was like
Wow.
short, like a couple of seconds. And it freaked me out. I was like taking my stuff back to my car to leave, you know, all
Mhm.
my targets and ammo and everything. And I shouted out and I asked, you know, I was like, hey, is anyone out there, you know, because I was afraid I might shoot them if they're like hanging out, you know, and, you know,
Right.
and there was no response. Nobody responded. So I was like, it's probably like some, you know, some people, local kids or hikers messing around. And then so I got back to my car and I didn't see anybody. What I did was when I left, I drove up and down the road a couple
Mhm.
miles in each direction, and I didn't see a single car parked anywhere on the trailheads, on the side of the
Wow.
road. You know, none of the houses had their lights on, so I was like, "Who?" You know what I mean? And that
Yeah.
just freaked me out, man. And then another time, I was just scouting for deer season, and I was checking out a new area, and I went into this area where I saw like, you know, like those teepees that supposedly the Bigfoots, they make like those teepees in the woods. They take like dead
Yeah.
branches and they stack them up. And I
Yeah.
saw one in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know if somebody was like, just went out there to like play a prank or whatever, like screw with someone.
Right.
But it was like in the middle of nowhere, like who would do that? And then, so I'm like, I kind of ignored it. I'm like, it's probably just someone with too much free time. And so I continue on, and I'm not on any hiking trail. I'm just going off of a compass, you know, so I'm off the beaten
Right.
path. There's no trails anywhere. There's no roads or anything. And I come across like saplings, like, you know, young trees
Mhm.
that were just like twisted, you know, like something was trying, like if you were to, like, let's say you were trying to grab a tree and like twist it off and break it off. That's what it
Mhm.
looked like. Like somebody came through there and grabbed like a few of the saplings and was just like twisting them like they wanted to break it off, but they didn't finish. They just twisted it. And there were a bunch of these saplings that were just twisted. And I didn't
Wow.
see no, like, you know, footprints, no sign of, you know, anybody there. It was just really bizarre, man. So those are like
Wow.
two experiences that, you know, make me kind of, you know, that's why I like to ask these questions to people, you know.
Yeah,
But
when you say, the laughter one, that reminds me of legends we have here, which is even bigger than Bigfoot. We have the little people. So,
okay.
all the tribes have these legends of little people that are, you know, probably like that tall, and they're, you know, like little elves. They're really mischievous, but
Really?
people hear them laughing, or, you know, out in the woods in the middle of nowhere, and you kind of want to avoid that because they're pretty mischievous and you could get like sucked into their black hole or whatever. But the coolest story I heard about that was in kind of Southwest Alaska, where the stories are very prevalent. A pilot was driving his you know, little bush plane, one of those little
Mhm.
Cubs, and over an area that was completely unpopulated. You can't even get to it. And he flew over like a whole city of these little people, and they all had teeny little campfires and structures, and it was just like a giant city full of little people, and he was just like freaking out. Um, and
That's
then
crazy.
sometimes the stories make the newspapers. There was also a story in the newspaper where like a little boy in a village went out and uh, you know, got frostbit and got lost in the snow barefoot or whatever, and like the little people brought him back to town. And
Wow.
you know, it made the newspapers and everything, and he was just talking about him and stuff. So it was a really weird story.
Wow. That's the first time I've ever heard of that. That's interesting. So
Yeah.
thanks for showing up. This was awesome. I learned a
Yeah.
lot. Thanks for your time. And if you guys haven't seen Chuke's Outdoor Adventures yet, definitely check out his channel. You know, he's a great guy, as you can see, and he does all kinds of outdoors related videos, and he might even do some prepping videos possibly soon, right?
Yep.
so,
Absolutely.
so thanks again for showing up, man, and I'll see you
Yeah.
guys later. Take care.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, man.